So welcome along to A Story to Tell with me, Richard Beauvoisin. This is mainly taken from my Radio Bath show every Thursday morning from 10 until 12. If you do like it, don't forget to subscribe, share it to others and let everyone know all about Radio Bath. Hope you enjoy it. So welcome along, it's Richard Beauvoisin here on Radio Bath. Today I've got all of my guests are lovely, Carolyn. I always say lovely, I don't know why, but there we go. Carolyn Hobdey, who I've known for a long time, but haven't spoken to for a long time. She's an author, a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and I know her as a dancer. Good morning, Carolyn.
Hello, lovely to be here. So lovely to see you.
It's nice, isn't it? So we used to be on stage together at the Bath Pavilion many years ago. I have very fond memories of those times. What are your memories of that time then?
Absolutely the same. I always brag about it, if I'm totally honest. It's like, oh yes, I used to co-teach a dance class of like 150 people on a Tuesday night. So like, which really you were teaching the dance class and I just happened to be there. But I do brag about it. So yeah, really fond memories. Loved it. As you know, my journey took off very quickly actually as soon as I joined Ciroc. And yeah, loved it. Really enjoyed it.
No, you were always very good on stage. We're sadly not at the Bath Pavilion anymore.
No, I saw that.
No, they raised their prices a lot, so we just couldn't afford it on a Tuesday night. But yeah, we still are open every Thursday at Bath Eastern now. But yes, you were based down here for quite some time. You're now based up in Yorkshire. I'm going to desperately try not to do my Yorkshire accent as this goes through, but I know already I'm going to fail dramatically. You haven't picked up a Yorkshire accent.
Harrogate is that it doesn't have a Yorkshire accent really. Harrogate it's like a southern enclave in the north was how somebody described it to me. So there are people with Yorkshire accents in Harrogate, but they tend not necessarily to be the people from Harrogate.
Okay, so obviously you don't have a Yorkshire accent yourself.
No.
No.
I can't, no, but yeah.
Have you tried to do the Yorkshire accent?
Do you know what? This is going to be really sad. My ex-husband and I, when we lived up here, because I met him up in Yorkshire the first time I lived here before we came down to the south, and I knew you. He didn't have a Yorkshire accent either, and he was quite posh and nicely spoken. He's still in Bath, so he might listen to this locally. But we used to talk at home in Yorkshire accents to each other.
Right.
Yeah. So we used to get it out of our system, like to each other in the house, so that we didn't seem like we were taking the mickey out of people when we went out.
It's a very difficult thing. I went up to the Lake District a while ago with my big kids, and literally crossed kind of like the Birmingham line as such, and then I turned into Yorkshire man, and I went into Geoffrey Boycott, who's an ex-cricketer, and I just kind of channeled his voice in my head of a typical Yorkshire person. And as soon as I came back down from the Birmingham line, stopped talking in that voice. Apparently it got quite irritating in the end, because obviously it's a not a Mickey take. It's a love of the Yorkshire accent, but obviously it's an extreme version of it.
Yeah, I love the Yorkshire accent. I have to say, I love the Yorkshire people, which is why I'm still here. I love the Yorkshire accent. It's great. And wherever you go in the world, you seem to find one.
Yeah.
In my experience. Yeah.
Can't get rid of them. Is that what you're saying?
No, they get everywhere. They do. It's a big county. It's the biggest county, isn't it, in England?
It is.
There is a lot of Yorkshire people to be found, but they do travel around the world for sure.
They do. Now, as much as I love talking about Yorkshire, we're here to talk about you today. So you have a title of the Midlife Mistress. So I've known you as a dancer. Kind of, what's just a very quick ethos of how you got to becoming the midlife mistress then?
Well, yeah, the midlife mistress is sort of more of a persona that I've had. It was really about, obviously I reached that point of midlife, believe it or not, and it was really about sort of like mastering midlife, but the midlife master would have obviously implied that I was a guy. So I thought I'm going to be the mistress of my midlife and all things midlife. And so I just, it was more of a sort of a persona to describe what I was doing at that moment in time. She's going a little bit more into retirement these days, not because I've reached retirement age, but because sort of the next phase of my business means that it's going to be less about the midlife stuff. But yeah, she sort of came about as a result of, I thought, I'm grabbing midlife by both hands, and actually making it okay to be in midlife. I think we sort of have this thing where we turn grey and we become a bit invisible, particularly as women,
Okay.
when we reach midlife. And well, you've known me long enough to know that becoming invisible is probably not really my thing.
It's unlikely. Let's go down that route. So in a nutshell, what do you do?
These days, so I am an author, a multi-published author. I am a keynote speaker. And I am a consultant, mostly in HR and leadership. So, hence why I do the workshop facilitation with leaders and strategic leadership. So, those are my sort of main elements of the work I do.
Fabulous. So I know you were in HR for a number of years. Kind of, what was that journey like being in HR?
Do you know what? I loved HR. I know it gets a really bad rap in many different ways, but it's a really, really interesting career. I fell into it by accident, as back then, like a lot of people did. These days, it's like a definite career path, career choice. There's degrees, etc. And that was, I sort of fell into HR just before that really happened. So fell into it by accident. But what I loved about it was how varied it is. The reason I sort of left key corporate world and doing HR in those settings for one job in one organization is I fell out of love of some of the environments I was doing it in. So it wasn't HR itself that I stopped loving. It was just more some of the places I was doing it. Um, but as a profession, it's so varied. You can have standardized systems, standardized processes, technology, all of those things. But the thing that is always so variable is the people.
Yeah.
And just when you think you've got stuff nailed down, somebody will do something idiotic or have a bright idea or, be amazing in a way that you didn't expect. So it's so varied. And that's what I loved about it. And that's what's kept me in that space, even now in my career.
So I've never really been that much in the corporate world. I've experienced it a few times, but it's definitely a world very alien to me because obviously being a dance teacher and a franchisee and that we run our businesses, but it's definitely not a corporate business. So what didn't you like about the corporate world then?
There are so many things to love about the corporate world. I had so many amazing experiences. I traveled, I went places. There's a vast number of people often in these organizations. So that again, that variety is great. The things that didn't work for me, so not in all of the environments, I didn't hate the corporate world per se, but there were just some environments where it was still very traditional. There's a lot of politics, and I don't want to do the politics. I just want to do my bloody job, right? I just want to turn up and do a really great job. And I found in certain places that my job almost became managing the politics. Like I was spending more time doing that than I was actually sort of doing HR. And it was that. And you know, there are some like not great behaviors, and again, that's not everywhere I've worked. I've met some and worked with some wonderful people, but because of those politics, it doesn't bring out the best in people. Um, and yeah, some of them just became a bit stale, and I'm trying to avoid, but I'm going to say it anyway. It became like quite male, pale, and stale.
Right.
And
What do you
when
mean
you
by that?
well, there's kind of lots of middle-aged white men with some very sort of traditional attitudes, and that still is the case in quite a lot of organizations. The predominant people that are still leading these big organizations do tend to be male. It's quite hard being a woman, particularly when I would refer to myself as like the only bird on the board, quite often. So the only female in the room. You're then doing HR, so they see that as soft, when it really isn't. If you've ever had to fire somebody, make somebody redundant, deal with their terminal illness, and their family around that, there is very little that is soft at all about the true world of HR, but they see it as sort of soft and it's all about loving that, people all the time and being nice, which it really isn't. And so sort of in that dynamic, it's quite hard. And like I said, you've got a lot of those sort of traditional views and traditional values. And you do have people that want to change and be different, but certainly the kind of environments that I was working in certain points in my career, very male intensive environments, quite traditional environments. quite hard to be a sort of vibrant female in some of those organizations.
Well, we're going to find out lots more with Carolyn as we go through here. Loads to find out, and a bit of time for some music now. But we're back right after this. Back with Carolyn Hobdey now. It's Richard Beauvoisin here right until midday today. We're going to carry on with your story now, Carolyn, and find out what is the Carolyn Hobdey edge. What is that?
So the Carolyn Hobday Edge, that's my new business branding. It's really about saying if you want to, as a leader, want to be sort of unapologetic in terms of how you show up. So you want to know who you are, what you're about, and be able to communicate that. If you want to be unstoppable in terms of the impact that you have, and like there's a lot of pressure on leaders, there's a lot of pressure on delivering results, and doing that through your teams. And if you want to be unforgettable, so I talk a lot about legacy. What's the legacy that you want to leave in an organization? Because often find, that leaders are just focused on today and the here and now, but it's actually about what's the legacy that you want to leave behind. So yeah, it's about being unapologetic, unstoppable, and unforgettable in the way that you lead people.
Okay, I was listening to a podcast, The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, fantastic podcast. And he was interviewing a chap that used to work with Steve Jobs. Now, obviously, no longer sadly with us because the owner of, or the person that was with Apple. And he was saying that still now, even though he died a number of years ago, he's still in the business. He's still in the office. People are fully aware of exactly who he is and how he would have wanted it done. So is that kind of where you're going to with this? You're trying to leave that sort of legacy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I want to leave that kind of legacy myself, but it's about encouraging leaders. So rather than them conforming to what I call this leadership blueprint.
Hmm.
We have an idea, particularly in the Western world, of what a leader should look like. And actually, it's a load of nonsense. And actually, it isn't what people want to be led by. And so it's about saying, what is the legacy you want to lead rather than trying to, like I said, conform to this blueprint that we have, which quite often doesn't work for the individual. They quite often leave are left like wearing a mask themselves and being a bit inauthentic because they feel like in order to be a leader, I need to look and sound and be like this and sort of almost tick these boxes. But that's quite often not who they are as a person. And what I'm into is saying you can be really successful as a leader. You can really leave that legacy, leave that imprint on people in a positive way, but actually do it authentically by being you and dialing into what makes you tick and then becoming interested in what makes other people tick. So it's about trying to tear up that blueprint of what we think a leader is meant to look like.
So what
And
does a leader, in your opinion then, what does a leader look like in the olden days then? What was that blueprint?
well, I think probably if we pick out some examples, I think quite often it looks like Donald Trump, who
Okay.
obviously is a leader and a very successful leader. But if we think about that, often if we think about leadership, if you Google leadership, if you look for images of leadership, you pretty much solely get images of men. Now, again, there are a lot of men that are leaders. There's lots of men that are really great leaders. So I'm not decrying that at all. But we have this sense that they're kind of strong, male, charismatic. They lead from the front. It's very much about them. There's quite a lot of ego. There's a certain amount of, we would see it as, we would call it assertiveness because we do that I do call it that when it's a guy, but it's that edge of aggressiveness, which is how we refer to it if a woman does it. But it's that kind of bold out there. It's all about me. I have all the answers. I'm telling, I'm directing, and I'm sort of being charismatic and bold about it in doing that, which is why it's that kind of, that blueprint of Donald Trump, really.
And therefore, for me, what should it look like now? Obviously, I'm looking at this from my perspective. I've been a leader in my business for a long, long time. And I
Hmm.
kind of look at how I run my business. And in a minute, we're going to analyze that a little bit more. I'm going to get you to analyze me a little bit. But so what should it look like now, in your opinion?
Well, it's really interesting. There's a fantastic book, if I can make a book
Go for
recommendation.
it.
So it's a book called "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders?" and how to prevent it. And
Catchy
I'm
title.
Yes. So yeah, why does so many incompetent men become leaders? I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name of the author, but it's written by a man, so it's not like some kind of female feminist manifesto at all. It's based on science and it's based on research, but and he brings all of that together. And what he articulates really well is this idea of the kind of confident, overconfident, charismatic leader is not fit for purpose in terms of what we want, and it certainly isn't actually what people want to be led by. Instead, what we want to be led by is what he talks about as being feminine traits. Now, I need to be really clear that isn't about wanting to be led by females. It's not about saying females are better leaders than males. It's about the traits. So, what I've described in terms of that leadership blueprint are very what would be seen as male traits. Feminine traits are much more collaborative. They're into teamwork. They listen and are empathetic more. They're much more about nurturing that team and getting the best out of people, and actually about seeing people as individuals as well as part of the team. So rather than it being about the leader and it's about them telling, directing, it's much more about collaborating, getting the best out of people, understanding their strengths, and bringing that to the greater collective good. And that's actually what people want to be led by, because they want to be led by somebody who listens to them, who sees them as a real human being, who, brings out their strengths and works to those strengths and helps them to work on any development areas. People actually want to and perform better under somebody like that. And I think that coincides really well with the era that we find ourselves in now. I think particularly in this, the generations coming through, I think in the post-COVID era, people want to be treated like an individual and they want to be seen like that, and heard.
Okay, so in your experience then, over the last 25 years or so, have you seen leadership styles change?
Um, I think a little bit more through necessity than desire. I've seen a little bit of that. I still see an awful lot of that blueprint that I talked about, those sort of trait blueprint. I see an awful lot of that because people have grown up with that. That's what they've had role models. They're not really sure of what the alternative is. They know that there needs to be something different. We're now at that point where we've got 5 different generations all in the workforce, potentially, depending on the size of your workforce. So 5 different generations that are of working age. So you've got all of that difference going on. And I think people know there needs to be something different. So we're starting to see it emerging. But actually, people, leaders are a bit like, well, I know this and I recognize this and this is familiar and it's what I'm shown on telly and on movies and on the news. But actually, I know that certainly the generations coming through want to be led by something different, and I know that I need to change. But I think we're at a tipping point at the moment where people aren't quite sure what to do and how to do that, which is where the Carolyn Hobdey edge comes in.
That's how you can help. We'll come back to that bit in a minute. But I mean, I've come across many experiences where managers lead by fear. If you don't do this, you will be in trouble. And that's the basic way in which they try and lead and try and inspire people. What's your thoughts on that?
100%. Because I think we have been again schooled in this idea that a leader is somebody that is to be feared. They have ultimate power and control. They decide whether you can pay the mortgage and put food on the table or not. Very much if you go back, 100 years, most definitely that, you had the foreman, you had the manager, the owner of the business. And, if you didn't do what you were told, then you were out, because they sort of had that choice and that option. And there was always somebody that was wanting and ready to fulfill your job and step in. So very much that feeling of fear, because we see it as a power dynamic and we see that that individual has the power to determine, like I said, whether we eat at the end of the day, whether we have a roof over our heads. And so there is a lot of that leading by fear. And I still think there's quite a lot of that around, albeit that, again, I see that leaders are seeing that that needs to shift, but they're just not quite sure what to shift it to because they've not had, any other real role model.
Well, we'll chat about me a little bit more later on, but very quickly, if somebody is really fascinated by what you do, I know you're based up in Yorkshire, but I'm guessing you're available like you are today on Zoom. So how could they kind of contact you?
So the best way to get in touch with me is to email me, which is info@carolynhobday.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's the place I hang out mostly. So if you want to find me on a social media platform, LinkedIn or Instagram, both good. You can find me as Carolyn Hobday on both of those platforms. But yeah, I travel around the country, travel internationally if somebody needs that too. But yeah, do lots of stuff on Zoom and Teams.
Fabulous. Well, we're going to come back with Carolyn right after this. Back with Carolyn Hobdey. Now it's Richard Beauvoisin here, right until midday today, here on Radio Bath. We're now going to scaringly, and this is quite scary for me, look at my leadership. So I've been running a business now for 25 years, a bit longer than that actually, about 26 years now. And I've definitely changed the way in which I run it over the years. But first of all, I'm going to ask you about your own personal experience of being part of my team back in around about 2010, wasn't it, for a few years? What was it like being part of my team? I never know.
Um, My recollection of that actually was that it was always really like inclusive. So it was very much like we're all just sort of pitching in and making it happen. And that was probably what was really nice about it. It didn't sort of feel like, so much that you were the boss and, you know, it felt really collaborative. I think that's the thing. It was about this is what needs to be done. Let's sort of crack on and make it happen. I felt probably at times maybe wrongly quite trusted in terms of doing things. Don't know whether I was worth that trust, but quite trusted to sort of go, right, this is the thing that you need to do, and you just get on with it. So yeah, it felt really inclusive. I think that would be the key word that I would use.
That's definitely the way in which I do it. And you're absolutely right. I do trust people. It's been sometimes a downfall of myself in that I've trusted people and they haven't necessarily done what I'd hoped they would do. But in the main, we try and choose, I suppose, very carefully the people that are in the kind of more senior roles, and they matter. Yeah, people like yourself being up on stage. It's, when you're up on stage, that's half of the job as such. The other half is actually being down on the floor and dancing with people. But yeah, you were talking earlier about, being a leader and being the Donald Trump, and you have to be out there. I've turned 50 last year, and I've quickly realized that my body can't keep doing what I'm doing. Back in the day when you were around, I was teaching 4, 5, sometimes 6 times a week. And I definitely had the issue that if I got hit by a bus, the whole business would just collapse. So over the last few years, I've been trying desperately to remove myself from the front line. And actually, sometimes that's been really difficult from a leading perspective to not have the limelight, because as a dance teacher and a DJ, you're kind of out there and you're thinking, well, I want people to say, hey, look how good you are. But at the same time, knowing as a business that actually you need to kind of give that to everybody else. And that's been quite challenging to do for me. But I still do the odd thing here and there to try and remind. We did a showcase at the weekend down at
Saw
Weston-super-Mare.
I watched that. It's
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you very much. And it was, we normally judge these days at competitions, or I'm comparing. And I generally think most people have forgotten that we can dance. And it's kind of one of those weird things. They never see us dancing. We're walking around with a clipboard and they don't actually see us full on dancing. So it was quite nice to kind of have one of those short moments to say, look, we can still do it. And from a leadership perspective, I felt it was quite important, because then people look at you and you go, yes, even at 50, they've still got it, going into that midlife crisis moment. But from a leadership perspective, I've tried to remove myself. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really hard balance because there will be a lot of people that will turn up to your classes. A lot of the people that have been coming to you, your really loyal customers for years, who want you,
Mm,
who are there because it is you, that's what they're used to. They want the person at the top, they want to feel like they're getting value for money, that they're getting the special treatment because they've got the top guy.
mm.
And you're right, it's really difficult when you have a business that is centered predominantly like around you. Like, how do you scale that business? How do you, like say, shore up that business that, heavens above, if something happened or you just couldn't be there for a while or whatever that was, that it doesn't like just, crumble. Um, it's finding a balance. I think it's about being visible enough that people, know that you're still there, that you are on the floor sometimes, exactly like you say, whether that's a showcase or whether it's just, dancing with people as part of the evening and the event. It's usually that sort of slow handover of power. I don't know how you've done it, but it's like, oh, this week the class is going to be taught by so and so, or this person's going to lead, and
It's
gradually sort of introducing somebody different. It's a little bit like, even though the analogy of the boiling the frog is actually incorrect, a frog won't stay in a pot of water and be boiled. It's completely scientifically wrong. But using that kind of analogy of, boiling the frog, of actually just warming people up gradually to the fact that other people are also really good and other people can also do this and they are endorsed by you,
yeah.
then you can make that transition.
Yeah, I mean, all of the teachers that we have working for us have all been to a large degree trained by me.
Mm.
So I've tried to not create me. It's very important they're still themselves,
I
but
was
have
going
a
to say,
lot
do
of
they still tell all your jokes? Do you train them on that as well?
the jokes haven't changed.
I'm absolutely confident they won't have
Yeah.
changed.
In fact, I saw somebody the other day. I taught down in Salisbury, which is the first time I taught down there in some time. And one of the crew members from Chippenham was there. He came down and I said a joke and I said, different venues, same jokes. And it really is. And that's just one of those things. The
But
jokes
that's
haven't
also the
changed.
reason that people keep coming back.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, isn't it? You kind of people want to hear new jokes, but at the same time, when you hear a joke that's going to come up and you go, I know what's going to happen, you feel very comfortable in that. That's why we rewatch the Friends shows all of the time, because you know what's going to happen.
Mm.
And that's absolutely fine. Regarding how long it's taken, I made it a 5-year plan. I'm about 3 years into the plan so far. But yeah, I have now gone from the point of teaching. There was one point I was teaching 6 times a week. I'm now teaching once a week.
Mm.
DJing wise, I was DJing 4 times a week. I'm now down to once a week.
Mm.
But it means also if I need to step in and do other things and cover, then I will. So next week I'm teaching 3 times, and that's just the way it goes because people are away.
Yeah.
But I have the capacity now to do that. But I also found that I had to try and run the business. And from a leadership perspective, trying to run the business was actually sometimes more important than being on stage for myself. So, but yeah, so regarding being a leader, I try very much I am the person in charge, but I try as much as possible to be in the background now, which is really weird.
Yeah, and I think as well, I'm not saying this is the case for you, but for a lot of leaders as well, they kind of struggle with that
Mm,
because like they like the kind of, it's me, I make the decisions, I'm the point of power or whatever, or that control, that sense of control, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's giving up control. And particularly
yeah.
when you built your own business, it's giving up control of basically your baby, isn't it? And going, actually, I'm going to hand it over to somebody else to look after it, which is really scary. And I think that can be a real challenge. And I think that's the point where leaders need to ask themselves, am I doing this because like actually I want to do it? My ego's kind of going, I'm doing this, or am I doing it because I truly am the only person that really can do this thing? And quite often, the answer to the latter bit is like there are other people that can do it, or you can train to do it, or whatever. So we have to be mindful of our ego not getting in the way.
I've definitely gone down more the mentorship route. So all of the people that work for me and stuff, I try and mentor them much better, so that's the role that I have now. Yes, I'm still on stage at least once a week, but I want those people to shine. And my goal has always been I actually want them to be much better than I am. So I don't have that ego necessarily saying I am the best. I kind of want them to be better than me because then I don't have to do all of it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also that's the sustainability for your business in the long term. So like, it's great you've got a 5-year plan, but then the other next 5 years beyond that, like you might want to, have more free time or do other things or, whatever that might be, that actually then if you've got a self-sustaining business because you've done that, then hey, all the better still.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into, so I do charity auctioneering. I'm writing my book. I'd like to get into a variety of other bits and pieces. Obviously, I do the radio show as well. I'd like to do more of this. So, and this is me. All of those things I can't put off onto anybody else. But all the other stuff I try and do so. So generally, would you say that my leadership techniques these days is more of the modern way of doing it rather than the Donald Trump way of doing it? I'm guessing.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, not everything about Donald Trump is bad. There's
No,
some
he gets stuff done.
He gets stuff done. He's a man that gets
Yeah.
things done. but there are really the ability as a leader is to kind of flex all of that stuff. The thing is to be able to be authentic to yourself, but actually you do have to be different things to different people at different times. That's the challenge of being a good leader. Yeah, in answer to your question, yes, I think that idea of, like I said, treating people individually, that much more mentoring type role, I think is definitely the way to go, because that allows you to see the individual, to nurture them in the way that they need to be nurtured, and again, not just a one size fits all. Pay them that individual attention. And again, we have to. My first line manager was amazing. I think I learned really a lot of my leadership skills from him. That was exactly that. You feel supported, but you're pushed all the time to do
Mm.
something that's a little bit uncomfortable, but knowing all the while that somebody's got your back, and if you get it a bit wrong, you're able to go and tell them. But actually they're pushing you just that little bit all the time to that next level, but always there, if you need, some advice or some support or somebody to step in. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's what you're doing. So I think that mentoring style, even more so actually, even than the coaching style. I always say that nobody wants to be coached out of a burning building, do they? They want to be, everyone to be told what to do. So, I think a mentorship style that says, I've been here, I've got the experience, and I'm helping to impart that to you for you to be even better still, and take that forward and add your skills and your ability and your thoughts to it, I think is a really great way to go.
Yeah, no, I love doing it, and yeah, it's something which I think I'll do forever, if I'm honest with you. Remind people if they want to get in contact with you, how they can.
I hang out a lot on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. If Instagram is your thing, I'm on there as Carolyn Hobdey, or you can get to me at info@carolynhobdey.com.
Back with Carolyn right after this. Back with Carolyn Hobdey now. It's Richard Beauvoisin here, right until midday. Now, we're going to go on to slightly different tack now. We've been learning all about leadership and your story, but part of your story was something which we discussed here on Radio Bath a few weeks ago, which was the menopause. But your menopause story isn't quite the same as everybody else's. So tell us about your menopause story, Carolyn.
Yeah, it is slightly different. In fact, I feel always a little bit at this point in my life a bit of a fraud when I talk about menopause, because I'm now 52, which the average age of the menopause is 51. So I've sort of been classically in that menopause phase of life. But that shows you how averages are really misleading, because my menopause actually began when I was 19, and it came about because I was attacked. So I was attacked when I was 19. I was sexually attacked when I was 19. And it became a domino effect from there. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 32 and I was trying to have a baby. But then I started to track back and things started to make sense. And I'd been backwards and forwards to the doctors for years with problems, and it never got picked up. And it was actually in 2022. So when I finally got diagnosed, I had a very weird sort of experience, this recurring reliving of the attack that had happened when I was 19. And I couldn't make sense of that at the time, because it sort of came out of nowhere, but it was replaying like a video in my head. And I always had this feeling that it was something to do with that. And then in 2022, a report came out where for the first time they'd done research and established a link between physical trauma, and certainly physical sexual trauma, and early menopause. And I sort of finally felt kind of vindicated, I guess, that I'd always felt like that was the trigger point.
That that's just hard, isn't it? Because being 19, 20, and in your 20s and going through the menopause, but not knowing about it must have been very difficult.
Yes, and there's lots of the classic symptoms. I mean, I've never had a hot flush. I don't. I mean, and I can tell you what that feels like because I talk to lots of women and I know
Mm.
what it feels like. But I never experienced one. And again, it's a misnomer because 25% of women don't have a hot flush in the menopause, and yet we classically, including GPs, are like, "Are you having hot flushes?" No. Oh, well, then it can't be the menopause. Total rubbish. So, I didn't have some of those kind of symptoms, but I had horrendous trouble with my periods. I was exhausted all the time, brain fog, I now completely recognize My not so much my memory, but my brain at times, so a lot of those like classic symptoms, the feeling that you're going mad, your skin being all over the place. But yeah, like not knowing, I just thought this was, again, just the classic thing of, terrible periods and, basically the medical system, the health system not really caring, to be honest. Like most girls that have, PMDD and polycystic ovaries and all of those other things who basically are told to kind of suck it up. And that's just what it is to be a woman, was really my experience.
I mean, I look at the reason I did the menopause show a few weeks ago was it was the third time that myself and Annette had done the show. And it was really interesting 3 years ago when we did the show, how society was looking at the menopause. And Davina McCall had just done her program and we were looking at it and it was much more in the news. But it still had a lot of stigma about it. It was fascinating when I was chatting to a lady who came into the station a couple of weeks ago that as she walked in, she was saying she was having a menopause moment because she'd done something. I can't remember what it was. But I was like, isn't that amazing almost that she feels quite open to talk to a man and saying she's having a menopause moment in these days. Now, we're talking 30 years ago for you now that you would have been going through all of this. And the research that I've done says that nobody spoke about it. It was just like a completely non-thing. Nobody spoke about it. So how did you get through it?
Well, obviously, in my 20s, I had no idea. I mean, the irony was that my mum was probably kind of going through her
Mm.
menopause at the same time. Um, but I got diagnosed at 32. I literally was trying for a baby, and like I came off the pill. I never had another period. Like they just completely stopped, and that's sort of when stuff, investigations and stuff started eventually. Again, a lot of the time, go away, it'll happen, it'll all come back, it'll all be fine. So I lost a huge amount of time I could maybe, and I don't know, have had some hormone therapy, harvested some eggs, maybe, but I was just sent away. So I lost all of that opportunity.
So I
But
know a
you're
classic question on that is how do
right.
you feel about that now? Because you can't go back in time.
No. Really effing angry.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the time, that was a lot of the, I mean, now it's different. I sort of, time does heal, but yeah, really effing angry about that. But I think at the time when I got diagnosed, I was mortified. I was so ashamed. That was the overriding feeling. I literally went from taking folic acid to walking into Boots and going to what was a very reduced and very clunky kind of menopause supplement section, which nothing like it is now, although I have issues with that now because I think they've monetized it with lots of supplements that really are not worth people's money. Um, but I remember the day after I walked into Boots and thought, well, I need to be able to do something. What can I do? Um, and I was taking folic acid the day before. And honestly, I looked in the mirror and I didn't know who I was because suddenly I'd gone from being 32 to like 52. I mean, I'm now 52 and I think it's great. But, overnight, looking in the mirror and thinking, I have no idea who this person is. I have no idea what the future holds. And I think it unfolded like a nightmare, actually over a long period of time. I buried it. So one of the things I did was that I just like I cried for like 24 hours and then I picked myself up. I thought, I don't want anyone to know. I'm totally embarrassed. Nobody's going to care. I can't relate to anybody around me in my peer groups. Then I'm going to have no idea of what this is like for me. Nobody's going to want to hear it. So I just didn't speak to anyone, tell anyone, picked myself up and went back to work.
So you
Um,
mentioned a fascinating word there for me a minute ago, and that you were ashamed.
mm,
Why ashamed?
because it just felt really embarrassing to be, and I was, like most women, we're not told about the menopause, we're not educated in the menopause. I knew vaguely, and my mum's menopause wasn't very bad, so we were an open family, and I knew, but like she wasn't having a lot of the menopause symptoms either, so I knew nothing. So I just felt, yeah, I felt really ashamed that this has happened, not least because I didn't know at the time, like, why has this happened to me? Like, what did I do? What's wrong with me? How do I even tell anybody about this? Because suddenly I'm this old lady. Because at 32, that's how it felt.
Mm.
And menopause then, like you say, the Davina stuff, the Mariella Frostrup and MPs getting involved, Carolyn Harris in South Wales, she's an MP and she's a real advocate. Um, None of that was going on. And so essentially, menopause was something that happened to old ladies. And I was 32. So it's like, I don't want to be associated with that. So yeah, shame. Shame was a really big part of it.
Now, last September, I interviewed Katie and a lady from the World Childless Organization. And this is the other side of it, isn't it? So you've gone through the menopause, the age of 32, and you're then not going to have children,
Mm.
which you've then realized.
Mm.
How was that for you? Because that, again, must be quite traumatic.
Horrendous. I'd be really honest and say, I was somebody I decided that I wanted a child, but I probably wanted like a child. I wasn't somebody that was suddenly like, I want a big brood or whatever. But it's so true, never do you want something more than when you can't have it, right? So it then, that became really disproportionate. Um, and it's still difficult. I'll be really honest, I hate Mother's Day. I'd like to run around the streets and kick every single one of them, because I hate Mother's Day. I just want to hide under the duvet. And I have the most wonderful mother, and I should be out there celebrating her. But quite frankly, I want to hide under the duvet until it's over because it's really traumatic. Because it feels massively unfair. And also, then there's people that don't want their kids, there's people that abuse their kids, there's, teenagers that get pregnant that don't really, don't want it. Well, there's people of all ages that get pregnant and don't want it. And it's around you all the time. And bearing in mind, I worked in HR. So also, when women get pregnant, which department do they come to go, oh, I'm expecting a baby? And then you have
Mm.
to do that. Oh, that's all really amazing. So I was confronted with it at work as well. The health system completely isn't set up for it. So when I went to get confirmation that this was indeed the menopause, I couldn't have children. I went to a specialist in Leeds at the time who was horrendous. I mean, he was yeah, awful. Treated me so badly. It was so traumatic, that experience itself. But you get sat in a room with pregnant women, and nobody takes account of just how awful that is because you're holding it in
Yeah.
all the time in terms of how that feels because you just want to stand up and scream at the top of your voice about how unfair it is. And I wouldn't deny anybody, I've had friends of mine that have had the kids since, and I couldn't be happier for them because it doesn't, like you say, your candle doesn't burn brighter just because you snuff out somebody else's, right?
Mm.
So I am able to be really happy for people, but there are those moments where you just want to scream and go, this is totally effing unfair. But yeah, the childlessness, and again, it's that thing, people quantify you by, they ask like, oh, what do you do for work? Which is really hard when you're out of work, oh, do you, do you have kids? Like, no.
Yeah.
And I have to say, as a woman, I always feel that need to justify myself and go, actually, I couldn't have children. And that's always the way that I answer it. Because again, I had somebody come into my office once, and say to me, his wife was having a very, very tricky issue with a pregnancy. It was really sad, really, really sad and desperate. I was hugely understanding of it. I really felt their pain, with what they were going through. And I said to him, and I'd never, and I said to him, look, I said, I couldn't have children. So, I sort of was being empathetic and sort of reaching out and sort of saying, I understand. And in that moment, despite how lovely I was, and understanding I was trying to be, and he said, oh my God, I didn't know that about you. I just thought you were one of those hard-faced career bitches.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's what you get because
Yeah.
people think it was a choice. People think you don't like kids, and all of those things. So I find myself answering the question of, do you have kids? Of going, no, I couldn't. I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
because I feel the need to go, I'm not some hard-faced career bitch that doesn't like
And then
children.
the downside to that, of course, is that you almost then have to tell your story over
Yeah.
and over again, which then also reignites the pain of going through that story, which again
Oh,
is very difficult.
yeah, and I can't tell you how many times, even again, going through the health system, it drives me insane because even now, at the age that I am, you go to a medical appointment about anything, like as a woman, about anything at all. I've got a pain in my leg, and then they go, "So what's the date of your last period?" And you're like, well, it was actually like, I was actually 32. So that's actually 20 years ago. And sometimes I do get quite arsy because I think if you haven't read
Yeah.
my medical history, if you don't know who I am when I'm presented to you, and I know you're under pressure, but like also this is pressure for me. The number of times I've had to retell my story in a medical context in particular drives me nuts because I think it's unnecessary. And it's exactly as you say, it's really upsetting.
Well, thank you for telling your story here on Radio Bars today. It's painful, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it as well. Um, and what's nice is that every time I see you, you always seem to be very, very positive still. And that's well done to you for that. It's time for a bit of a break. Back with Carolyn right after this. It's Richard Beauvoisin here on Radio Bath with Carolyn Hobdey, who's my guest. She's an author, she's a leader, she's a facilitator in many ways. And we're going to talk about the fact that she is an author right now. So you've written some books. How many books have you written so far then, Carolyn?
I have published three, and I've been a contributor to a fourth book here.
Okay. And we're going to say the word a couple of times. But what's the basic principle of the books?
Twats.
Lovely. Okay. And they're all based around that theme, aren't they?
Yeah, so I have a trilogy of books. The third one of the trilogy itself is still a work in progress, but I essentially have a twats trilogy. So we'll say the titles, and like you say, and then we'll hopefully not say it too much. So the first book was my autobiography, and that's called All the Twats I Met Along the Way. The second book of the trilogy was De-Twat Your Life, which was the journey sort of out of the dark place that I found myself in that led to the first book and is how the first book ends. And then I have a big corporate career that we've touched on briefly. So Twats at Work is the third book of the trilogy and the one I'm working on at the moment.
Fabulous. So regarding the first book, I want to know kind of what made you want to write a book.
The book I really wanted to write was the second book, which was all the things that I learnt after I got into a really, really dark place in 2018. A lot had gone on. I lost my job. I lost my partner and therefore my home and my step family, um, all in the space of 10 days. So I was in a really, really bad place. And I wanted to write the book about what I learned to pull myself out of that. What I learned about the people around me, what I learned about myself, the tools and techniques that I discovered that I lent into. Because for me, it was complete chaos at the time. And I thought, actually, if I can say to people, if you want to sort of rebuild your life or turn it around or reinvent yourself, then like here's a little bit of a step-by-step process. You have to do the work and fill in the gaps, but like here are the things to do, this 12-step process that you need to go through. But what somebody said to me as well, and in order to write that book, you kind of need to tell the backstory of how you got there and why you had to learn all that stuff and why you were pulling yourself out of a dark place. And that's when I wrote the first book, which was really just about setting that context and going, here is how I ended up there. And these are the life lessons that the world kept teaching me until it catastrophically taught me a big lesson in 2018.
Okay. And I'd love to know what your process was. So I'm currently writing a book. Who are you to give me advice? And it's meant to be quite a short book. And my process has been apparently quite different to a number of other people. So I'm intrigued what your process was, of actually how you wrote. Did you sit yourself in a room, music on? Where were you for your process?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? People do stuff in really, really different ways. I
Yeah.
did actually start out using a ghostwriter and actually told my story to somebody who then sort of formatted it into sort of chunks and almost like chapters, I guess. I'm going to say, and be really honest, I went back and I rewrote every word of it. Now, it was great that that person sort of chunked it up into chapters, but the thing that I didn't feel that they did was really find my voice. It didn't sound like me. It was my story. So I actually literally rewrote all of it. But the good thing was is I sort of had it in those
Mm.
sections. So that was, the first part of the process. In terms of the writing, yeah, just sitting there and yeah, rewriting it. I did have music on, but I be really honest, and maybe this is one of ones in terms of something you can play on the show. I'm a big fan of Freya Ridings.
Okay.
She wasn't that well known back then, and I listened to her album like pretty much on repeat. And probably because I knew the music so well, it didn't interfere. So it gave me sort of background noise and I love her music. But I knew it so well that it didn't interrupt with me being able to find the words. I think the really key thing with the writing is that I would say in the process, I cried a lot and I laughed a lot. Now, it wasn't cathartic in that sense because actually I'd gone through therapy. So it was actually the writing of the book at all actually came about because I sort of had all this story that I told to my therapist. And she was the one that ignited the thought actually about you ought to write all this down because it'll probably help somebody else. That's where it originally came from.
Yeah.
So I didn't need the book in itself to be the therapy because I'd done the therapy. But in order to find the words, to write the book, to find the emotion, I had to take myself back to the incidents and the places. And so sometimes I'd be like tears of laughter, like remembering stuff because it is quite funny in places and quite bizarre. Um, but other times, like literally, like sobbing because I thought I have to put myself in the place of feeling what that felt like so that I can articulate it in the right words and convey that to the reader.
And I have a similar thing regarding the music. I actually listen to piano music, but I even have to put it in a certain place. So if I'm writing, and I spoke to a chap again, podcast that's out a while ago called Dr. Ashish Bhatia, brilliant guy. And he was talking about writing and music and stuff as well. And he said it should be in a particular place in the room. And I actually have it in a different place in the room, whether it's right or wrong or not, I don't know. But I have to have it a certain volume and down to my right hand side. If I have it on my left hand side, literally it interferes with what I'm writing. If I
Mm.
have it down to my right hand side in a quiet place, then I kind of zone out a little bit. And then all of a sudden, an hour or two have gone by and I've written whatever it may be. I'm intrigued at how many times you rewrote, because what most people don't think is that you write a book and then you go, there it is. But actually, you write a book and then it might go to your editor and then it comes back and then you rewrite it and then it goes back and then how many did
Yeah.
you have?
It's the worst part of the process. I refer to it as like it's marking your own homework.
Yeah.
How it feels. I mean, I did like hybrid publishing. So, I mean, it's a bit of a checkered story because I had a publisher and I had to move from that publisher and actually do a second edition of my first book because that publisher turned out not to be great. Which was a real shame. So they didn't help me. The publisher I moved to was actually my PR and literary agent who then I met them later on. I already had the publisher. So, but when it came to republishing, I did everything with my literary agent because they were amazing. But yeah, it was that bit where, yeah, they comment on stuff and it would come back. I don't know how many rewrites and edits I did, probably about four.
Mm.
Um, and it probably should have been more, but again, my publisher promised that they had somebody proofread it. So I thought, right, any mistakes and whatever they'll take out of it. Turned out they didn't. And I
Okay.
realized when it then had gone to well, when it turned up, that actually I then started finding mistakes in it, which absolutely crucified me. But by that point, it sort of had to go. But yeah, probably about four times initially. And then when I did the moved publishers and went through my amazing literary agent again, probably did another nearly two of going
Yeah.
back through the whole thing again. Yeah,
I say
it's
it's quite a painful part. Writing the book is great fun. I love writing and just going, whoa, all of these things I can tailor you out, yay! And then you have to go through each section and go, that needs to be shortened. This word's wrong, and and I actually find it quite a painful process.
Yeah, yeah, a really painful. I think anybody that's written a book, and there's some bonkers statistic, isn't it? It's like all the people that start writing a book, I think only ever about 3% ever publish. It's something incredible, which is why I feel really proud of having done
Mm.
it. Very few people actually reach that point, even though lots of people aspire to do it. But people do underestimate, like you say, they think I've written the manuscript, away it goes, that's all lovely. Somebody else edits it and whatever. Particularly when you self-publish or hybrid publish, a lot of that then sits back with you. Um, and it is, like I said, like marking your own homework. You think, oh my God, I don't think I can read this like another time. And there have been times when I've almost like pretty much pulled like an all-nighter just to keep going and like make it happen because it's like I cannot stand another day of reading this. I'm going to stay up all night and I'm just going to get it done. So yeah, it's hard.
What and what was it like for you when you released your books? Because then you've got that moment where everybody starts reading your books and feeding back what they like and also don't like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive high to start with, and I was so lucky because on the day that we were in COVID, so it was January 2021, 18th of January 2021, that my first book went live. And so we were in COVID, but I was lucky enough again through my literary agent that I went on Steph's Pack Lunch on Channel 4, although they wouldn't let me actually talk about the book, which was interesting. I managed to drop it in at the end of the interview.
Okay.
Um, but they wouldn't let me actually talk about the book, but they wanted to talk about a particular part of it. So there was some great stuff, the Daily Mail then sort of came and said they wanted to interview me, and there was quite a lot of that that was on. So it was really exciting, but it's terrifying. And people have, I know that on Amazon, in fact, what's really devastating is that I think like the worst review on Amazon is somebody who had a first edition and like talks about all the mistakes and the typos in it, which obviously my publisher was meant to sort out. So that really
Yeah.
hurts. Um, but it's terrifying. It is like holding up your child and going, do you think it's ugly? It's like that, like, like it's so personal. But you have to kind of let it go. And the thing that I decided is that yes, it's great if everybody sort of goes, oh yeah, 5 stars, it's amazing. But the book is meant to be sort of provocative. It's meant to make people think. It's meant to be uncomfortable reading. I really do like, let the skeletons out the closet and go, look, here's the skeletons. And so from that point of view, I knew it would be a bit like Marmite. And you have to just sort of go with that. And I just think if everybody gave you 3 stars, you'd be gutted, wouldn't you? Because
Mm.
you'd be like, oh, it's totally beige. So actually, the 5 stars and stuff are fantastic, obviously. But I think I did on a different platform. I think somebody gave me like 1 or 2 stars and whatever. And I actually wrote, and they wrote a review, and I actually wrote them a reply and I said, do you know what? Thank you, because at some point this had to happen.
Yeah.
Actually, you've done that for me. Like the biggest fear is getting 1 star and somebody going they hate it. But actually, once it happens, I responded and was like, actually, you've kind of lanced that boil and I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Because you won't please everybody. You just won't.
No, you never will please everybody. Um, but yeah, well done for writing. I will get my book out. I have an editor. There's the wonderful world of ChatGPT as well, which you can just load it up now and it will take out any grammar errors and stuff. So that
Yeah,
does make it easier,
it does make it easier. Yes.
which is a little bit better. How are we going to listen to Freya Ridings then? So yeah, it's time for Freya Ridings here on Radio Bath. Time for the last part now with Carolyn Hobdey. She's been here all morning talking about actually a variety of different things, from the menopause to your books to leadership, even analysing my own leadership. Before we do the quick fire round, remind everybody, Carolyn, if they did want to use your services, how they could get in contact with you.
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. I hang out there a lot. If you like something a little bit more social media-y, it's on Instagram. You can find me as Carolyn Hobday, or alternatively, send me an email at info@carolynhobday.com.
Lovely. Right, it's time for your quick fire round. I let every guest know what the first question is, but you don't know what the other questions are. There are 11 questions here. Somebody said to me recently they love the fact that there are 11 questions, not 10, but 11. And that's quite random, apparently, but there we go. So, what is your favourite ice cream?
I like really good quality vanilla.
You are vanilla. Yeah,
Mm.
nothing wrong with that. Any particular manufacturer of vanilla ice cream?
Um, Not necessarily. I'm not a huge fan of ice cream. I don't like anything
Okay.
that's cold.
Okay. Why not? What's wrong with cold?
I don't like cold. I like warm drinks and warm hugs and hot water bottles. I'm not a cold person.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Right. I think I know the answer to this one. Are you tidy or messy?
Oh, tidy,
Yeah,
very.
I knew that.
Mm.
Yeah. Why are you so tidy then?
I think it's learnt behavior. I think my parents are really tidy. My dad's like really tidy, a bit of OCD in there. It I if there's something out of place, so we're talking about writing, about the writing process that we were. If in my spare room there is something out of place, a pair of shoes that I've not put away, and I'm trying to concentrate and I'm trying to write, I can't, knowing that that mess is somewhere else in my
Okay.
apartment. So yeah, it's that bad.
So are you to the level of if I opened up your food cupboards,
Hmm.
would all the labels be round the right way? Are we at that level?
Mostly, not quite that sort of OCD about it, but probably pretty much. Yeah, you'd be able to see what was in there.
See, I'm kind of a mixture in that I put something away in our cupboard yesterday and I had to turn the label round the right way. And then I looked to the left of it and there's just things chucked on top of each other in a
Hmm.
completely random way. So I think I'm kind of a bit of both in that some things have to be right and other bits are just kind of, they'll do.
Yeah.
It's close
Hmm.
enough. Right. Love or hate roller coasters?
Love.
Oh, you're a lover.
Big love.
Okay,
Oh
tell me
God.
more.
Yeah. I mean, so recently, I went on a month-long trip. I went to Japan was the start of that trip, and I arrived. I was on a guided tour, but I arrived 2 days early to acclimatize, whatever. I spent 2 days in Tokyo Disney. There's two different parks, Disney Tokyo. I spent 2 days at Disney, really purely so that I could just try and get on as many rides as I possibly could. Bigger the better. Love them.
So, what about in the UK? Do you go much in the UK?
Not massively because I don't think they're as good.
Okay.
I have, but they're just not, we just don't do it like Disney did. So I've done like Disney Florida and Orlando and whatever, and they are just so mega.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, I've done Alton Towers in the day. I'm pretty sure I have been on the big one at Blackpool, I think a long, long way back in the day.
Hmm.
But yeah, love them.
Love a roller coaster. Very good. Important one this. Do you hang your toilet roll over the top or behind the back?
Oh my God, it has to be over the top.
I knew you'd say that.
100%. Completely wrecks my head if it's not. And even to the extent where people take the mickey, because in my so I've got an ensuite bathroom, but I've got like a house bathroom. Even put a point in the toilet roll. So when I clean the bathroom, it has a point folded in the end of it as well.
That's nothing wrong with that. I did that myself the other day. So I'm going to ask you to follow up on that then. That if you went to somebody else's house and it was round the other way, would you change it?
It would depend on the mechanics of the toilet roll holder. If it was
Okay.
one of the ones where you can just slide it off and put it back on again, probably yes. If it was one of the ones where you have to sort of take it apart and it might ping and like springs fall out of it and stuff, I wouldn't touch it.
You wouldn't touch it. Okay. I've always changed it
Mm,
every time, whenever
mm.
I'm anywhere. Do you eat your chocolate from the fridge or from the cupboard?
Oh, you mustn't put chocolate in the fridge. So back in the day, one of the businesses I worked for, which was actually down in Somerset, was a desserts business. And we made high-end desserts for Marks and Spencer's, and we had a chocolate specialist that came in at one point to help us with the development of products. Never, never, never in the fridge. Not good for the chocolate, not good for the structure of the chocolate. So never in the fridge, no.
I love it from the fridge.
My
I'm
sister
so
puts it
sorry.
well, and I have to take it out the fridge and leave it on the side and let it warm up to room temperature, like never out the fridge.
No,
So
especially, do you know,
bad
I was
for
just
it.
thinking of a bounty. I don't eat chocolate very often, but like if we get the celebrations or something like that, so a mini bounty. I love the crunchiness of the chocolate and the softness of the coconut. I sound like an advertising campaign now. Yeah,
I'm going to be honest, Richard, I'm a little bit disappointed in
are
you.
you? Do you like me less now? Is that basically what you're saying?
But the toilet roll thing made up for it. The fact that you actually
Okay,
did it in other people's houses, like, oh, love it.
okay. So you're okay with that, but less on the chocolate, right? I know the answer to this one. Do you make your bed in the morning?
Oh, yes. It's one of those things. There's a fantastic talk by I think he's a Marine in the States. and it's on YouTube, I think. And he was doing a graduation speech, and he talks about the very fact of just making your bed in the morning is about setting yourself up for that's your first achievement of the day, and it sets the standard by which you're going to live. So yeah, making your bed in the morning, but not least, like when I was a kid, if I hadn't made my bed in the morning, my mum would have been like all over me like a rash, nagging me for it. So yeah, always make the bed.
Okay, follow-up question to that then. I say there's 11 questions, probably about 20 questions in this, really, but there we go. My follow-up question to it is, apart from the pillows, do you have any extra cushions on your bed?
Currently, no.
Okay.
I have four pillows on there. Occasionally I have like a bigger pillow, one of those square ones that I might take off the spare bed and sort of put if I'm propped up if I'm like reading or something. But no, but I do turn down the top of the duvet so that it's sort of nicely, neatly done. And I do have a blanket across the bottom as a bit of a decorative thing, but no extra cushions.
No extra cushions.
Fact, when I go to a hotel, if it's got extra cushions, the first thing I do is pull them straight off and stick them on the floor because I think they must be, along with the cups, what about the dirtiest thing in the room?
Why the cups being
Because
dirty?
they clean them in the sink. They don't take them away and do anything. They rinse them in the sink.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
the glasses and the cups. So whenever I go to a hotel, so here's the OCD, I boil the kettle and I blanch the cups before I would then make a drink in the cup so that it destroys any bacteria around the edge because a lot of hotels don't take them away and replace them. They rinse them like in the sink and put them
Yeah.
back.
And put them back. Thank you for that information. As a well-traveled person,
Loads of hotels now going, we don't do that, we don't do that. Be in
you
touch
never
with me.
know. What is your favorite breakfast?
Oh, that's a really good question. If I could have if I didn't have to make it,
Hmm,
if I could have any choice at all, I like some sourdough toast, some avocado, smashed avocado with a bit of chili in it, and some poached eggs, and ideally a little bit of hollandaise sauce.
very nice. That's a very middle-class breakfast.
Oh, it is, isn't it? I even have an avocado injury on my hand. And when I did it, so I cut myself like taking the stone out of an avocado, and I went to the hospital in Harrogate. Even the nurse went, "This is a very middle class injury."
That is. If you had to do it, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh gosh, what would be my go-to karaoke song? I've hardly ever done karaoke, can you believe? Um, I think Since You've Been Gone by, is it Kelly Clarkson?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's a tough song to sing.
Mm.
So would you
Yeah.
class yourself as a singer then?
I've sung in choirs like for years. I've sung in the Royal Festival Hall a couple of times in London. So yeah, I did do quite a lot of singing at school, but I wouldn't class myself as amazing. But I'm probably a bit of the person who's like not with karaoke at all, but I'm the person that's prepared to stand up. So the choir that I sing in, I have done a few solos, but not necessarily because I'm the best singer, but because I'm the person that's prepared to go, yeah, all right, I'll do.
I'll do it. We will finish off with that song, I think. It's a great song.
Okay.
But yeah, tough song to sing.
Yeah, I
Favorite
don't say I do it well, but yeah, that's when I have done it, it's been that.
oh, okay. Favorite TV program or film?
The Big Bang Theory,
Oh, yeah.
massive fan of the Big Bang Theory. Have it on in the background a lot. Um, yeah, I can quote from it, like you name it. If I was to do Mastermind, it would be my specialist subject.
Okay, so I'm also a Big Bang Theory nerd, which you didn't know. I've watched the whole thing at least three times through.
Oh God, I'm probably on about 20th time. Like,
Yeah. So yeah, and therefore my second favorite program would be Young Sheldon. Have you
oh
watched Young
yes,
Sheldon?
yes.
Although I haven't caught up with the Mark and Mindy's first marriage or whatever it is yet. I still haven't caught that.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
So series seven is
hmm,
just I managed to watch it because on my travels just lately, because it's on Netflix, I think it's coming soon that season,
yeah,
but you can't get it anywhere else. And it's not even been on Disney, I don't think. But when I went on the flight, one of my flights just recently, Young Sheldon season seven was
yeah.
available on the flight, and I because my flights were really long, so I was going long distance, I binge watched the whole thing.
I have watched again Young Sheldon many times through and just yeah, just love it to bits.
I think
Um,
the kids that act in it are absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
Lovely young Sheldon. So
Yeah.
yes, it's up between Big Bang and young Sheldon probably.
Big Bang Theory, an amazing series. It really is. Two questions to go then, Carolyn.
Okay.
If you came back in your next life as an animal, which one would you be and why? I said they get slightly deeper.
Yeah. You know, my sort of favorite animal on the planet is a honey badger.
A honey
Um,
badger. Okay. Why a honey
they
badger?
because they're really intelligent and they have a lot of sass. They break the rules. I kind of quite like them. They're like the rebels of the animal world. But probably if I was to be an animal myself, I think, in all honesty, I think in a previous life I was a cat.
I knew
I
it. As
love
soon as you went down that route, I knew a cat was coming out.
yeah, I think, I love, and I don't think I'm necessarily aloof like a cat is, but like I love a little bit of warm sunshine. I really like to sleep. Yeah, a
A cat
cat.
is a cat, needless to say, is the most popular answer. But
Yeah,
I'm going back with the honey badger. Quite like
but
that.
yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, it is my spirit animal.
Yeah. Do you know, I think the second time I asked that question to a guest, it was an author, and he said he wanted to be a seagull so he could poop on people. I still remember that
There is
answer
that
really,
too.
really well.
Yeah.
Your last question, Carolyn. Where is your happy place?
Oh gosh.
I know it's a tough one.
Yeah. Do you want a physical place
Not
or do you?
necessarily. It can be a mental place as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna be like really, really honest here, and I know you'll think like it's a setup, but it's not. I think when I dance, and
Yeah.
I haven't done it for a really long time, like I said, there's reasons behind that, but I think when I dance and you just lose yourself in the music, and even when you're not very good, the whole process of learning, the technicalities of it, and you can't think about anything else if you're really in it, you have to just give everything to it. So I would say when I dance.
No, dancing is an amazing thing to do, and been doing it now for nearly 30 years, and probably,
So
hopefully, still do it for another 30 years.
yeah, in
Maybe
some way.
not at the same level, but as the body goes. But thank you so much today, Carolyn. I'm definitely going to get you back on. We've scratched the surface. There's loads more we want to chat about yet, so I'll be getting you back on in the very near future. Hope you've enjoyed today.
It's been amazing. It's been so lovely to see you again. It's just been like old times. So thank you.
It has, and thank you very much. I'm back next week between 10 and 12. Hope you have a great week.